This is Wrestling with Wrestling's Past and Present. I'm Tim Kurt.
And I'm Roland Pulis.
And today we are going to get into WCW Beach Blast from 1992. That show taking place 28 years ago today.
It's amazing to look at some of the names on this card. I know we're going to get into that, but talk about blast. It was a blast from the past.
Oh, absolutely. I definitely enjoyed watching this for the first time. I was like a year and a half when this show premiered, so I didn't watch it live.
I don't think I saw it either, ever. So, I think it was the first time I saw it. And I know we discussed a little bit beforehand, but I was digging this show.
Yeah, absolutely. I was definitely digging it as well. But before we get into that, we're going to take a look back at Backlash from last week. We kind of gave you our predictions on the show. So we're going to go through the match of Backlash and see how right or wrong we were.
Yeah, it can't hurt to at least look at it a little bit, see how it went. I thought Backlash wasn't a terrible show. It was okay. I know the Strowman, Miz, and Morrison thing was kind of filler, but that match still wasn't terrible. I know I'm kind of jumping the gun a little, but all in all, the show wasn't as bad. I had low expectations for the show, put it that way.
Yes.
And it wasn't bad. It really wasn't that bad.
No, definitely wasn't as bad as it could have been.
Yeah.
Your pre-show match was Apollo Crews getting a win over Andrade for the U.S. Championship, or to retain the U.S. title. We both had Andrade in this one, so we kind of started off the night on a bad note.
Yeah, I guess you can only go up from there, but we still, a lot of that too on my end was based on with Paul Heyman being out and Pritchard being in, if guys like Apollo were still going to be pushed or not. And it looks like they're still staying the course, and rumor has it that he might actually join MVP and Lashley. He picked up a win on Raw, using the ropes to his advantage over Shelton Benjamin. So rumor has it there might be a new stable in the coming weeks on Raw.
Yeah, the rumor swirling about Apollo Crews' heel turn, so to speak. Yeah. So we'll see how where they go with that. So we kick off the actual card with the triple threat tag team match for the women's tag team titles. You have Bayley and Sasha Banks retaining against Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross, and the Iconics, Billie Kay and Peyton Royce. We both had this one correct here. We both didn't see them taking the titles off Bayley and Sasha since they just won them about a week or 2 weeks ago before this. So we were right on that one.
Yeah, I think they're leading to something bigger, so it makes sense just to leave the titles on.
All right, then next up we have Sheamus getting a win over Jeff Hardy in just under 17 minutes. You were right about this one. I was wrong. I had... we actually both had Jeff Hardy winning this one.
Yeah, no, the reason that you said that is because I told you how I was pissed off that I missed the cue that the WWE... Usually on the go-home show, whoever gets the upper hand usually loses at the pay-per-view. So I should have known that whole... The P segment that actually had some backlash against it, pun intended.
Yes.
With Jeff Hardy getting the upper hand, should have been the cue that Sheamus was going to win that match, and Sheamus dominated that match. He looked impressive. He pounded the piss, I guess, pun intended, out of Jeff Hardy. That was a brutal match.
Next up, you have Asuka and Nia Jax for the Raw Women's title. This ended in a double countout. We both had Asuka retaining and winning this match, so they kind of did a draw here, so Asuka still retains.
Well, if you remember it, I also said that it could be shenanigans with Shayna Baszler, which didn't happen, but it was still shenanigans that it wasn't a clean finish. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, I'd say we both got that one because the title didn't change hands. Even though technically Asuka didn't win, she still retained the title.
Yeah, I'm counting it as a win for us.
Yep, I agree. Totally agree.
Next up is the 2-on-1 handicap match for the Universal title. Braun Strowman retaining against The Miz and Morrison here. About 7 minutes and 20 seconds on that one. Another one we didn't see Braun relinquishing the title here. So we both picked Braun to win this one, and we were right.
And it looks to be, if you saw any of the SmackDown highlights, it looks to be exactly as I predicted. Tim agreed with me too, but it seems like this was just filler to prolong the Fiend, Bray Wyatt, Strowman love triangle, even though one person is the two people are the same person, but it seems to be furthering the story of Bray Wyatt and Braun Strowman. And actually on SmackDown, Bray Wyatt did a promo as old Bray Wyatt.
Yes.
As Follow the Buzzards Bray Wyatt. So definitely more to come there. And then that was just filler for Strowman to get through the pay-per-view.
And next up was the singles match for the WWE Championship. Drew McIntyre retaining against Bobby Lashley and MVP, or with MVP. Lana would come down, cause a distraction. McIntyre would bump Bobby Lashley into Lana. Lana would fall down, and Drew McIntyre would retain. This is kind of maybe planting the seeds for the end of the Bobby Lashley-Lana storyline, because Bobby Lashley said on Raw he wants a divorce. So hopefully this thing is over, or getting to be over.
You know, and everybody, our listeners know how I feel about this garbage. So hopefully this puts the nail in the coffin. They also kind of had a little also backstage segment with Natalya and Lana afterwards, saying how they each had it bad. Lana has it bad, she's getting divorced, and Natalya gets no respect from the girls in the locker room. So I don't know if maybe they're going to become a team or she's going to manage Natalya. Clearly, they're moving her away from Lashley, which, thank the Lord, that's finally happening. And I will say, I'm not the biggest Bobby Lashley fan, but he probably had his best match back against McIntyre at Backlash. It was a very good match for him.
Totally agree with you there. The main event was Randy Orton getting a win over Edge and what was built up to be the greatest wrestling match ever. I'm not sure if it was the greatest wrestling match ever, but I thought it was a pretty darn good match. It went about almost 45 minutes long. I thought, they lived up to the hype as best they could. I mean, that's a lot of pressure when it's the greatest wrestling match ever. I liked how they brought back the punt, and that's how Randy Orton got the win there. So I actually was really impressed with that main event. I thought it was a nice way to close out the show.
Yeah, I'm not going to say it was the greatest match ever. It was definitely had an old school feel to it, which was good. Mm-hmm. They had like you and I talked about it. They had it at the beginning of the show with Howard Finkel, beginning of the match rather, with Howard Finkel announcing them in, which was pretty cool, with the old MSG microphone in the ring, which is pretty neat. It definitely had an old school feel. It was cool to see the rock bottom and the pedigree in there. The Olympic Slam was in there.
Yep.
It was a pretty good, solid wrestling match. Like I said, greatest of all time, probably not, but definitely a very good match.
Absolutely.
Edge, comes back healthy. We know that he tore his tricep in the match, so hopefully speedy recovery, because now that they've each won one, there has to be a rubber match eventually. I think, like I said, we talked about it last week, I think they were planning on that for SummerSlam, but obviously won't be ready for SummerSlam, so maybe it'll be Survivor Series, or maybe it'll be the Royal Rumble, or one of the big a main event, one of the bigger pay-per-views down the line, but definitely they're not done yet.
No, and we should mention that was the only match that we differed on. Kudos to you for getting that one right. I had Edge winning, so I was wrong on that end.
Well, like I said, I couldn't see them dubbing it as the greatest wrestling match and then having Orton lose when he's been wrestling for 9 years and Edge hasn't.
Yeah.
It would make Randy Orton look like a clown if he'd been wrestling for 9 years and saying he's been mailing it in and all this stuff. For him to lose would have made him look really bad.
Absolutely. So there it is. That's of Backlash 2020. Overall, I think, like you said in the beginning, kind of exceeded expectations. I was thoroughly impressed with the main event. So yeah, I definitely thought it was a good show.
Yeah, I liked it. Like I said, I had low hopes for it, but it actually was a pretty good show.
And speaking of another good show, let's transition now into WCW Beach Blast, all the way back in 1992. Like you said, the card was stacked here. We're going to run through some of the names, we're going to run through the matches as we go along, like we always do. But a lot of familiar names on this card, a lot of great wrestling. I want to make a quick note before we get started that I really thought the announcing was fantastic. You have Jim Ross and Jesse Ventura on the call here, which, when you think of commentating teams, you don't really think of them two together because they weren't around for that long, but I actually was really thoroughly impressed with the announcing on this show.
Yeah, and thanks to Jim Ross for retweeting me.
Yes.
I thought we both kind of marked out on that, which is pretty cool. I took pictures and I posted on Twitter if anybody saw them. And I just thought it was cool that all three of those guys that do the podcast with Conrad, Shabani, Bischoff, and Jim Ross were all there. So it was pretty neat. And it dawned on me because I am a member on the ad-free shows. Cheap plug there for you, Conrad. But so I listened to all those guys. So I just thought it was really cool to see 28 years ago these guys were doing their thing.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's get into the matches. You had one dark match on the show. It was a 6-man tag with the Junkyard Dog, Tom Zank, and Big Josh getting a win over Tracy Smothers, Richard Morgan, and Diamond Dallas Page. So a couple of familiar names in there that DDP, Junkyard Dog, and if you're a true wrestling fan, you know the other names as well.
Yeah, and I guess Tracy Smothers isn't doing really well right now, from what I've heard.
Yeah, I've heard this.
I know there's a GoFundMe for him. He's having some issues. So if anybody is a fan of Tracy Smothers or a fan of the wrestling business back then, check it out. See if you can, any little bit will help for anybody. It's not just, and it goes to prove that guys back in that day didn't make the money that's there now. If somebody, there's a lot of older wrestlers that are struggling. So if you're a fan of them, or if you watch them and you have a memory of them and they need help and you can afford to spare a little bit, give it to them.
Yeah, absolutely. We kick off this show with a singles match for the WCW Light Heavyweight Championship. So this is obviously prior to the Cruiserweight division. You have Scotty Flamingo getting a win over Flying Brian Pillman to become the new Light Heavyweight Championship in about 17 and a half minutes here. I thought this was a solid match to open the show. I thought the match was a little hampered for the fact that in this era of WCW, you couldn't jump off the top rope. It was a disqualification, and they actually made a point of that throughout the show. They had just made the rules changes recently, too. So, like you said, later on in the show, and even throughout the show, it came into play. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, having a guy like Flying Brian, and the end of the match was pretty cool, too. He kind of went for a tope over the top rope and missed and landed on the wooden entrance ramp type thing. It's more like a platform, mm-hmm. But it was a cool way to end it without really, Brian. But and Scotty Flamingo, for those who don't know, that was Raven.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool to see a guy that obviously didn't live up to the Scotty Flamingo gimmick. That wasn't what ended up getting him over. It was the Raven gimmick, and he was Johnny Polo in the WWF at the time. So it was cool. It was a good way to start. A little bit long, I think, one match for what it was, but it wasn't a bad match at all.
No, absolutely agree. Good way to open the show. Your next matchup was Ron Simmons, or you may know him as Farouk from his WWF days, getting a win over the Tailor-Made Man, who was Terry Taylor. You may know him as the Red Rooster. Match went a little over 7 minutes. On paper, I thought this was going to be just a filler match, and essentially that's kind of what it was, but I actually thought Ron Simmons looked really good here. I thought they actually put together a pretty decent match. So this one exceeded my expectations.
Ron Simmons is a no-nonsense badass,
mm-hmm.
And it's cool to see, he was the first African-American world champion.
Yes.
And to see him not wearing a stupid headgear as Farouk and kicking ass before any of that happened was a cool insight for me. I knew Ron Simmons, and I knew who he was. To go back and see him as Ron Simmons, as the former All-American football player coming out and just kicking ass, that was pretty cool. He's always, I think, been a little underrated, especially when he went to the WWE, because they put him in that stupid gimmick at first.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was definitely with Bradshaw and in the APA. He was definitely an ass kicker then too. But it was actually, like you said, it was a surprisingly good match for what it was based on the two guys. And Terry Taylor's not a terrible wrestler either.
No.
For all the flack he might get for the Red Rooster gimmick and all that stuff, and supposedly he was going to be Mr. Perfect, but he ended up being a Red Rooster instead. Kudos to both of them. They put on a pretty solid match, really.
Yes. And your next match is Greg the Hammer Valentine getting a win over Marcus Bagwell by submission in about 7 minutes and 17 seconds. Marcus Bagwell would have become Buff Bagwell later on in WCW. To me, though, this was a filler match. This kind of just didn't really overwhelmingly excite me or anything like that. It was kind of just there for me. But I thought Greg Valentine looked pretty good. I think he was a little bit probably on the back end of his career at this point. But overall, I thought it was a decent match, but nothing too exciting.
Yeah, and I mean, this is the beginning, somewhat of the beginning of their career for Marcus Bagwell. This is before he would team with Scotty Riggs and before he would become Buff Bagwell. So it's definitely cool to see someone in their early stages, just like Scotty Flamingo, same kind of thing, the early stages of his career, to look back and see what they would become later on down the road. I mean, just what? I mean, that was 92, so just in 7 years, he was Buff Bagwell in the NWO.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's cool to look back at. Yeah, and Greg the Hammer Valentine, another one of those guys who, had the WWE recognition, too, and that helped. But I think he might be a little bit underrated, too. But it was like you said, it was kind of a filler type match, but it's, again, even the filler type matches weren't bad. There was no like, oh, that stunk. You know what I mean? There was no real stinkers on the card, so that helped.
And this next match definitely was not a stinker. You have Sting getting a win over Cactus Jack in a Falls Count Anywhere match in about 11 and a half minutes. Sting's coming in as the WCW World Champion. This is a non-title match. This is more of a brawl. I mean, this is your hardcore Mick Foley kind of match. I mean, it was hardcore, I think, for those standards back in 1992, not by today's standards.
There was no flaming tables or barbed wire or anything like that. But that entrance platform came into play again as Sting came off the top where it was no disqualification. He didn't get disqualified for it, but he came off the top of the flying clothesline. And that's what ended it. He did it on the entrance ramp, the wooden platform, and that's how he scored the pinfall victory.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was a really good match, entertaining. I think the name recognition definitely kind of adds to the entertainment value of this match, but this was one I would definitely recommend go back and watch. It was really entertaining to me.
Well, and it goes to show you that before Mick Foley was Mankind, he had that Cactus Jack gimmick, and it goes to show you that he was a big time player in WCW. And for whatever reason, when JR brought him in, you hear the stories about how Vince McMahon only signed him so JR could feel what it was like to get his hopes let down.
Yeah.
To get his hopes let down by somebody. And clearly he wasn't let down. And even back then, he was, Mick Foley is a very impressive talent, both in and out of the ring. I mean, his books are great. He, be able to play his character pretty much at once, too, is pretty cool. I mean, he did that once in that Royal Rumble where he was all three guys. So kudos to him. And, yeah, Sting, probably the best WCW wrestler to never go to the WWF when it was WWF. He came later on, and Sting's a legend. He's an icon. So it was definitely a good match. I agree.
And the good matches just keep coming. This one, you have Ricky Steamboat and Rick Rude in a 30-minute Iron Man match. Ricky Steamboat.
This was the match of the show for me. Not to cut you off. This match was awesome. This match was great.
Yeah, it was amazing because they had such good. I mean, aside from the fact that they're great technical wrestlers, it had such good story. I like how they built up Rick Rude to have the lead. He had a 3-1 lead at one point in this match, and the reason why Ricky Steamboat got a win is because Rick Rude came off the top rope, but they played it up as he did a high risk maneuver so he could get another pin. So he had a 3-1 lead, and I like how they built up the story of the babyface having to make this triumphant comeback in the match, coming back from that deficit. So I thought it had excellent storytelling, excellent wrestling. Like you said, probably the match of the show. Nothing but good things to say about this one.
Yeah, it was cool how they ended it too. There was about 3 minutes left in the match. They were tied 3-3. Rick Rude has Steamboat in a sleeper hold 2.5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And then somehow right before Pee Wee Anderson, the referee, right before he was able to drop Steamboat's arm, Steamboat comes back to life, kicks off the turnbuckle, and actually falls back onto Rick Rude to get the pin. And then the next 30 is to try to get right back up.
Yeah.
Clothesline, body slam, everything. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. I mean, it probably had 6 2 counts in that last dance.
Oh, I hit a bunch.
Yeah, so it was definitely a cool match. Like I said, easily, there was a lot of good matches on this card, but this one for me was easily the match of the show.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Such good, like I said, such good wrestling and storytelling in the match. Definitely go back and watch this one if you I know we still have a couple more matches to go, but this would probably be the one that we recommend to watch.
You could start, if you have an hour to kill, you could start at the Sting match, and we'll go right through Sting, Cactus Jack, and this match together. Yep. It would give you about 45 minutes of wrestling, and it'd be totally worth it.
Absolutely. Next up, have a 6-man tag team match. Ole Anderson is your special guest referee here. You have Dustin Rhodes, Barry Windham, and Nikita Koloff getting a win over the Dangerous Alliance, which was Arn Anderson, Steve Austin, and Bobby Eaton with Paul E. Dangerously. This match ended in disqualification when Arn Anderson came off the top rope, and Ole Anderson, being part of the family, didn't play any sides and ended up disqualifying Arn. I thought this match was good. It left me wanting a little bit more out of these guys. I mean, there's so much talent in this ring, with Arn Anderson, Steve Austin, Bobby Eaton, Dustin Rhodes, who's still wrestling today. We've talked about him plenty on this podcast. He's having probably the best run of his career. So I thought this match was a good match, but it left me wanting a little bit more.
Yeah, no, and it was weird placement, too, for them to have a finish in a match, to have it follow. It was almost a let-me-up match, from following the Rude Steamboat match. And, I mean, I hate to phrase it that way because the talent in the ring, it wasn't a let-me-up match, but they almost used it as one.
Yeah.
And, it was too bad that it went the way that it did, because of the talent in the ring. I mean, you had a ton of talent in that ring of those 6 guys, and it's too bad they couldn't have figured out something else. But yeah, I do like Joey Wrinkle, having him involved and having him have to make the decision of, well, he jumped off the top rope, you're getting disqualified.
Yeah.
It is what it is, and it was really cool. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And our main event is a tag team match for the World Tag Team titles. You have the Steiner brothers, Rick and Scott, getting a draw, actually, with Terry Gordon and Steve Williams, Dr. Death Steve Williams, in a 30-minute time limit draw. This match was just okay for me. I thought it was weird that they decided to close the show with this. I didn't think it was a main event level type match, and if it is going to be the main event, I wanted to have a finisher. I wanted a decisive winner and a loser, and they gave us a draw here to end the show. So I thought it was a good match, but I thought the placement was a little weird, and I wasn't really a big fan of the finish, given that it was the main event.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. That you kind of want there to be some sort of method to the madness, to end a match like that, to have a non-finish. I totally agree. The placement of these matches on this card, it's weird that you have Sting in pretty middle of the card, and then you have the Steamboat Rude match follow that, and then really the card was kind of a letdown towards the end. I mean, the match was still good, but both the endings, you have disqualification and you have a time limit draw.
Yeah.
So if that's the only knock that I can say on this whole show, really. The show itself was fantastic. The wrestling was good. Like even for what it was in the 6-man, the wrestling was really good. But to end matches that way, it was kind of a letdown. But all in all, some of the names that we went over for this show, all-time greats. There's no other way to describe any of these guys. I mean, when you have your lower name people, then were like Terry Taylor and the guy that would become Raven. So it's not, a Buff Bagwell, guys like that who, even though they have big name recognition then, ended up having it. So there's nobody really on this card that you're like, okay, who's this? Like, who did this guy become? What did he do to get there? Because there was a ton of names on this card. And it's cool to look back and see 28 years ago, I mean, you have, like you said, Dustin Rhodes still going. And like you said too, to your point and the stuff we've talked about, he probably is in the best shape of his life right now and having the best run of his life at 50, 52, whatever I mean, it's amazing. So, and like I said, this card from top to bottom on paper looked good, and it really didn't disappoint. Like I said, some of the finishes were a little wonky, but wrestling wise, this was a great show.
Yeah, absolutely. I was definitely impressed there when I watched it for the first time this week. Like I said, obviously our pick is, if you had to pick one match, Ricky Steamboat, Rick Rude, the Iron Man match there. But if you have a little bit of extra time, definitely recommend the Sting Cactus Jack match as well. Those are the two that really stood out for me, but overall the rest was fantastic. And just the entertainment value. I was really thoroughly entertained with this show. Just everything from the announcing to the wrestling to the storytelling. I thought it was a great show. That definitely, this is kind of a super one. You don't really, Beach Blast only had two versions. They had 1992 and 1993, so it's not really a big name pay-per-view in WCW history, but I think it's definitely a sleeper.
Yeah, I think that I would rate this an 8. This may be the highest I've done personally since we started the podcast.
Yeah, I would go 8, maybe even a little bit higher, 8.5. I definitely think it's in that range. It was a really good show.
Well, and like I said, even the matches at the end, it wasn't the wrestling that let you down. It was the finishes, and that's not the wrestler's fault. It was just the way that they did it. And to be fair, draws nowadays are starting to come back with AEW, which if you do it correctly, it's not a bad thing. It can further a storyline. It can make somebody less. Like, I mean, the time Jungle Boy faced Jericho and made it 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And all that did was further the fact that he was a believable character. He didn't win anything. He just lasted, and it made people believe that he could last 10 minutes, hang with Chris Jericho. So if you do it right, time limit draws aren't a bad thing. It's just you probably shouldn't have that go on last.
No, I agree. So yeah, that's our rundown. WCW Beach Blast 1992. Look it up on the network. I don't think you'll be disappointed at all. And we hope to not disappoint you next week. We're going to cover Vengeance 2005. This one has another great card highlighted by Triple H and Batista and Shawn Michaels, Kurt Angle. So I'm really looking forward to watching that. And we will run that down for you next week.
Yeah, it'll be the exactly 25th anniversary. So that'll be cool. 15, sorry, bad now. From 2005. So it'll be cool to look back. It's awesome when we kind of steal this format a little bit from Conrad. He kind of was the guy that innovated this format. But it's so cool to go back and watch these old shows. And when you find a match like a Rick Rude, Ricky Steamboat, and you're like, holy crap, I missed that. I never saw that. I'm glad I did. That makes it totally worth it for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I love going back and watching these shows because we were kids, teenagers when these shows happened, so we have a little bit better perspective now that we're older. We're more analytical with these shows, and I really think it gives us a new perspective on the wrestling business. So I'm really looking forward to diving into Vengeance 2005 and the shows that we're going to cover in the future here.
Yeah, it definitely, like you said, the newer perspective on it, older, the more experienced, mature, it gives you a different outlook on the matches versus just being a fan. Now I hate to use the term mark or smart mark, but now that we're way more of that than we are just a young kid being a fan. So we're able to look at it a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. So Vengeance 2005, that is what's coming up for you next week right here. We all hope that you're still staying safe, and we will be back and talk to you guys again next week. And until then,
that'll be not to cut you off before you get us off of here, that'll be our 30th show. 30th episode.
It's amazing.
So again, I think that's cool too that we've made it. Thank you to our fans again. Not to cut you off. I just wanted to put that out there. We didn't know if we were going to get 30 episodes or 3.
Yeah.
So the best part is too is that having a little more exposure and trying to get you guys, if you guys are liking it, tell us. Feedback. Mm-hmm. I put posts on Facebook all the time that I see. Don't be afraid to communicate with us. We don't want. We're not shy. We'll get back to you. We'll get. We like listening to you guys. So let us know. And again, thank you for listening. And yeah, it's really cool that this will be a big 3-0.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to just kind of say exactly what you said. Knew how far this podcast would go, and to make it to episode 30 next week is quite amazing. So again, like Roland said, thank you to everybody that listens to the show. You're the reason why we do this, and we're having a lot of fun, and we'll continue it for a long time.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off. You can take us home now, buddy.
All right, sounds good. Everybody have a fantastic week. I'm Tim Kurt.
And I'm Roland Mabula.
And this is Wrestling with Wrestling's Past and Present.